Hello, and welcome to the Eugene Real Estate Podcast. I am your host, Vince Casey. This is the first podcast devoted entirely to the Eugene real estate market, where every month we bring on local experts to discuss current trends to help us navigate the ever-changing landscape that is real estate. The Eugene Real Estate Podcast is now sponsored by House to Home Construction. House to Home Construction. Love where you live. Welcome to a very special one-year anniversary episode. This month, we go back to where it all began with Matt Powell, the creative financing wizard at Blue Ink Capital. His episode on private financing has by far been the most listened to episode, with the podcast as a whole reaching over 2,000 plays and continues to grow every day. Thanks to you, the listener. Let's welcome Matt back to the show. Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Vince. It's good to be back. I can't believe it's been a year. Holy cow.
Yeah, you're telling me. How are Tanya and the kids doing?
They're doing good. They're doing really good. Carson, my 12-year-old's playing basketball. Ava, my 17-year-old's trying to graduate high school early, which I think is a good thing for her. So everyone is happy and healthy, and it's good to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you that don't know, Matt's wife, Tanya, is an excellent business coach for real estate agents. She coaches many of the best agents in Lane County. And if you're trying to figure out your next move, she's a great person to reach out to.
Yeah, I always say I'm the president of her fan club, and I couldn't underscore that enough, Vince. She's great. And it's not just real estate agents too, and she has a lot of other professionals she coaches in her high performance program. So yeah, if you're ever looking for some personal development coaching, Tanya's great.
Yeah, y'all make a great team. It's always good to see what y'all do together. Well, this time last year, I was pretty nervous about doing the first episode, but you were great and we made it through just fine. And now we're back to where it all started. And we're going to focus this episode on reviewing some of the past shows and getting up to date on the current market. So let's start with where we're at today. Our current market is a unique one. I'm calling it a hot pocket market. I've got clients dropping contingencies, bidding on properties well above listing price, and we're still losing out on properties. Given some of these properties are in really desirable neighborhoods and there's great presentation and the houses are priced right. But however, on the other hand, I'm also seeing great properties in Santa Clara, Bethel, Danabo that are just sitting on the market waiting for an offer. It seems like once you get out of the neighborhoods that are walkable or bikeable, the market tends to soften. How have you been seeing the market recently?
I love how you describe it as a hot pocket market, Vince, because I believe that's very accurate. It goes back to the old adage of real estate: location, location, location. And if there's inventory that's priced right in a good location, we're still seeing, at least I'm seeing, still robust activity, multiple offers. And you're right, the further you get out, it seems to be a less competitive market. It's also a price point break that I think we'll talk about a little bit later, but stuff under 500,000 in good locations, it's moving. It's still moving. And then stuff in the higher price range and maybe not the more ideal locations, it's moving slower.
Yeah, it seems like Eugene's a little bit finicky once you hit that about 15-minute drive mark. Some of the bigger cities, a 15-minute drive isn't a big deal. But people in Eugene like to be close to their grocery stores where they can go out and maybe walk and get a cup of coffee and sort of feel the community vibe. The more suburban neighborhoods that you get into and the further out, it's just a big detractor here for some reason.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do think, though, I was thinking about this, this could change. If we don't get that affordable housing inventory in our core, in those walkable neighborhoods, you will see more opportunities in Crestwell, Monroe, Junction City, Veneta, because first-time home buyers will realize that's where they can afford to own a home. So I'm hoping we see more inventory in Eugene come online that's walkable and affordable. But it's kind of a supply and demand issue as well, as it has been for a few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And those smaller markets tend to follow Eugene's growth pattern, even if they're a year or two behind. So those are still really good options financially for people.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true.
So, I'd like to start off our review of the past season by going back to the Matthew Gardner episode, where he mentioned that home prices plateaued in 2023. I personally was shocked to hear that they had not depreciated. Like many agents, I had listings that I had to reduce the price, sometimes multiple times, in order to get them to sell, when in the past they would have flown off the market, going well above asking. How can we look at this market and say that home prices didn't go down?
Yeah, that's interesting. And when we look at statistics, we have to remember which statistics we're looking at too. Are we looking at an average sales price for what area, what specific neighborhood? Maybe it's for a county. I think the reality is um, prices have softened. And even if they have plateaued, I think last year when I was on this, we talked about, real estate's a hedge against inflation. If you own real estate and we have robust inflation, it's a hedge. Well, if we're having inflation and your home price stays the same, that actually is a depreciation. So there's different ways to look at that, both possibly positive and negative ways. But I do think our market has softened. One area we can look at is maybe a home went on the market a couple years ago for 500,000 and got bid up and sold for 525. Well, that same home comes on the market now and they have that comp for 525 and they think, well, let's go 529. Well, it sits on the market, they reduce it to 519 and it sells for 515. So one thing that has changed is the initial listing price. That same home was 500. Now it gets, listed at 529, but sells in the middle there at 515.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there enough action in the hotter neighborhoods that are appreciating enough that it kind of offsets the homes that may be depreciating because they're on a busy street, or perhaps you have that highway noise that's a detractor? Are those two
Awesome.
offsetting each other?
Yeah, I think possibly. I mean, the reality is there's still, as I just mentioned earlier, a supply and demand issue, but buyers now can be a little bit more picky,
Mm-hmm.
and it's there because of rates being higher and inventory being a little bit higher, they can move a little slower. They don't, they're more picky. So there is going to be the homes that, like you said, the busier street or the not the ideal location, they might sit longer,
Yeah, definitely. Well, from episode one, we talked about the rates spiking at historic levels the way they did a few years ago, and you spoke about rates being buying power. And Brian Ranstead mentioned it again in his episode, calling it an affordability issue. Rates recently started coming back down again. At their peak, they were right around 8%, and it seems like they're coming back down and living around 6.5. Of course, talk to your lender about these numbers. This depends a lot on your finances and your credit score, but let's just use 6.5 as a nice round number. What is that doing for affordability now?
Yeah, it's interesting. The reality is, and I think we talked about this a year ago, is people buy a monthly payment. It's what they can afford. Conventional lenders look at a debt to income ratio. How much debt do you have and monthly obligations on that debt? What's your monthly income? What's that debt to income ratio? So when rates change, it changes your affordability. For example, a $400,000 house using your 8% on a 30-year, the principal and interest on that is $29.35 a month. Well, let's say that same house is $450. So now we're, 450, but at today's rates of 6.5, 30-year principal interest is 28.44.
Nice.
So it's actually less expensive with a point and a half change in rates in the downward direction when you're looking at a house 400 versus 450 on the monthly. So that's really a great way to illustrate the affordability of how big of a part interest rates, conventional, traditional mortgage rates play in the home buying process.
Oh, that's going to be exciting to see what happens as rates continue to go down. It being an election year, are you predicting that we're going to see even lower rates come?
Oh man, I hate predicting rates or even thinking about it. But the reality is, we're kind of in this weird time where I think everyone's saying, okay, where rates are high. I don't think they'll, can go any higher. I don't know. I think we might see a little bit of ebb and flow over the next couple months. It's March 1st today. We're recording this. I wouldn't be surprised if we actually see a little bump up in rates in the next 30, 60 days.
Mm,
But then, yes, I do believe they will start to come back down as we near the election time. Um, if I was in a situation where I was looking to refinance or buy and I had the opportunity to time rates, I probably would see what's happening at early fourth quarter this year.
perfect. Yeah, I had a fantastic episode with Dustin Volstead about the difficulties of flipping houses in Eugene. And you yourself were telling flippers to maybe rein it in a little bit and do Formica countertops instead of quartz and try to keep your price range down. Are you still preaching precaution in 2024 to investors?
I am. It's interesting. I enjoyed that episode with Dustin. One of my takeaways was a paint color he shared. I'm always struggling to find good paint color, so I appreciate Dustin sharing a go-to paint color. But absolutely, and we are more conservative right now with our residential flips. I think some of our repeat borrowers are not liking that as much, but until we know what happens with rates and inventory, we're just being more conservative. The advice I'm giving flippers on a residential single-family flip is don't go fancy. Make sure it's financeable, shorten your holding costs and your time, holding that asset, get it back on the market. But, for a while there, if you could have that nice granite countertops and maybe that neat master bathroom with the extras, it was worth it. I'm saying now, bare minimum. It's more important to keep that asking price down than putting some of those extras into it. So absolutely, I think it's important to be cautious right now.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest areas to be precautionary in with flips is going to be the neighborhood that you choose. Go ahead and try to get a nice little cul-de-sac area if you can, and try to stay away from being backed up to the freeway or being on those busy streets. Neighborhood is everything right now from what I'm seeing.
That is so true again. And I'm going to repeat it because I think it's so important. Location, location, location. So take your time, make sure it's a location you want to live in. And it's always good too. If you're looking at buying a property as a primary residence, go buy that property at different times of the day. What's it like at 8 a.m.? What's it like at 1 p.m.? What's it like at 8 p.m.? Just to get a feel for the neighborhood. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and drive your comps too.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. On the luxury market episode that I had with Tiffany Matthews, we learned that despite the rate hike, the higher end homes were still moving pretty quickly. And everyone knows the lower end of the market, that 300 to 400 range, is red hot. That leads me to believe that the mid range market was hit the hardest by higher rates. Have you had that experience?
Absolutely. It's what's interesting about that is, and this is from my personal experience, over 24 years in the business and seeing thousands of transactions. Believe it or not, the upper end homes, it's almost mind blowing how often those transactions are cash.
Right.
So I'm talking about the 900,000 and more purchase. And so when you're paying cash or putting down 50% or 80% or 90%, interest rates don't play as big of a factor. So when we saw that first bump in interest rates, we really didn't see the upper end market hit as hard because rates weren't a factor. There's a large number of those transactions that are either cash or a large portion down. So I would say, in our market, Lane County, between 500 and 900 is kind of where it was hit. Again, a supply and demand issue with stuff under 500. There's just more buyers than homes in good locations and good conditions in that price range under 500. So that 500 to 900 was hit. It was, those are people that are usually putting down 10 or 20%. So a change in a point or two in rates is significant change.
Yeah, this might be a good time if you can handle that monthly payment to those first time home buyers that have been inside their house 3 to 5 years to look at that mid range pricing. It might be a good time to upgrade your home if that's what you need. If you're getting a larger family or if you need more square footage, I would definitely be advocating for that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
In episode 8, Amanda Beaumark introduced us to the idea of assumable loans, where a buyer can assume the rate of the seller. So, assuming the seller bought around 2018 to 2021, that would be a huge difference in your monthly payment. I have since that episode heard some criticisms of assumable loans, such as they take forever to close or they don't close at all. Have you ever been a part of a transaction that had an assumable loan?
In my history of real estate, yes, I have. But I think the criticism comes from the fact that how rare they are. I've actually never seen one on a conventional loan. On conventional financing for a 1-to-4, I haven't seen an assumable loan. FHA, VA, USDA, some of those, have the assumable function. And what I think the advice I would say, if you're shopping, always ask though. Always ask. And the seller might not even know if they have an assumable loan. So I think criticism aside, it might be rare. It might take longer. You still have to qualify for that loan. And to be honest with you, why it probably takes longer is lenders probably aren't as happy and accommodating to accommodate it. They would rather underwrite a new loan at today's rates. But I think it's something, if you are a borrower, you should always ask. And if the seller's like, well, I don't know, encourage them. Say, well, can you research that? Especially if it's an FHA, VA, or USDA, the odds are higher that it may have an assumable function.
Yeah, and Amanda definitely was preaching that the squeaky wheel gets the grease in those situations. So, and she sounds like she's more than happy to help squeak for you too. So.
Yeah. Well, the banks are in money to make the banks are in business to make money too. And if they can loan that money out at a higher interest rate, they will do that. So yeah. You got to squeak sometimes.
Every time, for sure. Yeah. So you're into private financing. I actually had to call you the other day because my buyers were looking at a home that had a non-conforming water source. And we were thinking we might have to go private money on that. So I know that you have a lot of investors that you talk with every day about different properties needing to go private money for various amount of reasons. But whenever I had Dan Gandy on, he was talking about investment properties. So I definitely thought of you first and foremost. But with him, we were talking about rental properties not penciling anymore. And what I mean by not penciling, meaning the rate that you could charge somebody for rent wouldn't match your monthly mortgage payment anymore. And he was basically encouraging investors to look at the West Coast as a long-term investment strategy where you make your money when you cash out down the road, like 5 to 10 years. I know that you work with a lot of investors at Blue Ink. Is that the advice that you're offering them as well?
Yeah, it's interesting. I really appreciate Dan, and he's a great investment agent. And I just want to, what he said is so true, but it's not just West Coast. It's all real estate all the time. You got to look at real estate as a solid long-term investment. I think the mistake people get into, and maybe you've heard me say this before, is as soon as you start looking at real estate as a short-term high yield investment, you're going to get in trouble. So you got to go into every real estate transaction as, can I hold this long term? Do I have the ability to service the debt if I need to hold it long term? Is it a solid long term investment? Yes, I think real estate is a solid long term investment. And what Dan is saying about the West Coast is absolutely true right now. Is if you're looking at putting 10 to 30% down, it doesn't pencil. On a side note, I hate that comment about penciling because anything will pencil if you put enough down.
Right.
If you pay cash for a property, it's going to pencil, it's going to cash flow. But that's when you have to look at your cash on cash return. And I think now with higher rates and things having a harder time penciling with traditional, let's say 10, 20, 30% down, you got to look at your cash on cash return as part of that factor. So you don't get into the pitfall of what I just said. So I'll just put 40% down and I'll make it pencil. I'll put 50% down. Well, then you got to start really doing the math on your cash on cash return, because that might not be a good investment now if you're strictly looking at the cash on cash return.
Yeah, I think that 2023 started making investors be a little bit more flexible on their exit strategy. One of the exit strategies that he tended to like the most was one called BRRRR. And no, it didn't just get chilly in here, but he was talking about a strategy where you buy, rehab the property, and then refinance and repeat. Are any of your clients over at Blue Ink using the BRRRR strategy right now?
Oh, we're closing BRRRR loans every month, and you're missing one R in there, Vince.
Oh,
It's buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. The rent is an important R in there because there are still a lot of great loan products out there that are debt service coverage ratio loans, DSCR loans. So you buy it and you use money like mine, private money. You're going to pay higher, but it's a short-term loan. You get in there, you rehab it, you rent it. And then as soon as that you have that rental income, you can go and refinance in a more traditional product, getting rid of my 12% money into that, we'll say 7% money right now on a 30-year AM. So it'll stabilize it, and then you repeat it. And hopefully that last R, the repeat, if you score a home run when you do that refinance, maybe even pull cash out, maybe part of that initial down payment, that equity infusion you did at acquisition, and you use that and you go do it again. And it's a great process. Buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat.
absolutely. Yeah, thanks for explaining that and catching me on one of the R's there.
Oh, that's all right.
Well, I know we've had a lot of fun episodes here. We had Nadine on last time, and she brought up the Leeburg Dam being taken down by eWeb, which I had known nothing about. We've talked to Isaac Judd about the housing crisis, Joey Dion about new construction. I know you're an avid listener of the podcast. What has been your favorite episode so far that you've gotten the most out of?
One thing I have to give as a disclaimer, I think I know all of your people that have been on over this year personally.
Right.
Some really well,
So
like
you have
Matthew
to say
Gardner and
all
I
of them.
are dear friends. And yeah, I don't think there's a guest you've had that I don't know very well. So, but that leads me to what I really realized is how fortunate, how blessed we are in Lane County to have so many good professionals, like the Amanda Beaumarks of the world and the Title and Escrow and Nadine Scott, that has such a specialized area when it comes to river property and what's going, not just real estate up there, but what's going on upriver in the McKenzie Valley. So it's a great reminder of how many good people are in this industry, and kudos to you, Vince. What an abundant mindset. Here you're giving a resource to the public on what's happening in real estate, not only Eugene but surrounding areas, and you're having, for lack of better terms, your competitors on. And I think that's great. That shows the abundance, and it's a great example of the collaborative industry we have in the Eugene area.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to keep tying in the satellite areas. Like I'll eventually have a coastal agent on, and I want to get into some of these smaller markets too. So people really do have a broad swath of all the information that's out there, which in real estate can be a tricky road to navigate.
Again, because it's location specific. And there is, the reality is, I'll take this opportunity to say the right real estate agent for maybe one area of Eugene may not be the best real estate agent that you would hire in Veneta. And I believe that. Now, people might disagree and argue with me, but it doesn't mean one agent can't do all over Oregon. But there is something to be said about agents' different levels of expertise and knowledge of what's going on in the market. So, and we are fortunate, we're blessed in Lane County to have a lot of good real estate agents.
Well, speaking of locations, what's going on with the Eugene to Baja 3000 this year? How's that shaping up?
Good. So, last time I was on here a year ago, we just finished the trip and we had some good laughs talking about the trip, which was in 22. So we're doing the second trip this November 7th through 14th. And it's going to be it's a race meets a scavenger hunt from Eugene to Ensenada, Mexico this time, through way of Eugene, Reno, Vegas, to Ensenada, Mexico, on a budget of $3,000. So that includes your acquisition of a vehicle, getting that vehicle fixed up and making it down there. It's going to be a fun trip. If you want to check us out, we do have an Instagram, which is EUG Baja 3000. And it's a fun time.
So what happens when your hoopty breaks down in the middle of the desert? Can you cut into that budget a little bit to get it towed to?
You can. It's one of those things where you got to evaluate the score sheet's about 8 pages long. It's you have to follow it. But yes, there's just incentives for spending the least amount on your vehicle. In fact, trying to acquire a vehicle for under $1,000 is usually a pretty good goal because you're going to have some repair costs. And then you do sell your vehicle at the end of the trip. We sell our vehicles in Palm Springs or donate them. If you donate them to a nonprofit, you get a point system for exactly what you put into it, which is so there's some incentive there to donate it to nonprofit. But you also, if you sell it, there's a point system on the ROI of your vehicle. So it's a lot of fun.
Gotcha. Can you still sign up for that, or do you got a full roster?
No, absolutely. It's open, and information's on that Instagram page. So it's a fun group. Vince, we'd love to have you. You need to put a team together.
I'm so tempted. Yeah, it's definitely on my bucket list. I'm not sure if this is the year, but we'll be in touch about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, if someone wants to get a hold of you to talk about private financing, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah. I mentioned the Instagram for Eugene to Baja, but one of the things I'll mention is for Blue Ink Capital, our Instagram and our social media links give great examples of the unique things we do. So our Instagram is at blueink.capital. So that's BLUEINC.capital. And if you want to see the kind of stuff we're financing, this is, I think, one of our more recent posts. It's a house that was under rehab that had like one wall. So something a bank could never finance, but we'll step in, we'll offer the funds to get that project completed, and then they'll sell that or refinance that. So that's a good example of seeing the unique things that we can fund at Blue Ink Capital. You can always email me at matt@blue-ink.com. And again, ink is INC. And then our phone number is 541-434-1818.
All right. Thank you so much for that information, Matt. And thanks for making the anniversary episode so special. And best of luck to you out there.
Thank you, Vince. I appreciate it. And thanks for doing this podcast. Again, I think it's a great service to our community and keep everyone updated about what's going on in real estate.
Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, that's our show, folks. I'd like to thank our guest, Matt Powell. I'd like to thank our sponsor, House to Home Construction. And I'd like to thank Patty Rose for producing the show. And I'd like to thank all of you for listening. Next month's guest is Brent Cole, and he is going to be bringing us up to speed with all the tips and tricks to use during buying season. Good night, and we'll see you next time.
If you have a question for the show, feel free to email us at eugenerealestatepodcast@gmail.com. If you would like to work with Vince Casey as a buyer or seller, please email him at vincecaseyrealestate@gmail.com. Be sure to mention this podcast with House to Home Construction to receive up to $500 off any roof bid from a competitor in writing.